Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. In this video we're going to be doing a discussion about whether you should pull for Childe or Hu Tao, assuming you want one of the two. I actually have touched on this in recent videos, but I figured I'd make its own dedicated video, as this is probably something I should have done earlier, but kind of had other things in my mind. And yeah. So let's just get into it. So I'm going to give you an answer right away, then discuss it, and then discuss situations where you might want to do the opposite, okay? So if you're asking me, Childe or Hu Tao, it's Childe 100%. Now, before you go to the comments and say, but Hu Tao is the stronger character, and this is true. This is something I talked about in my last video, where it's not necessarily about the power of the character, it's about what they allow your account to do. And that is very important when you're talking about Childe versus Hu Tao. So, if you are this is especially true for anybody who doesn't have access to an absolute massive amount of units. Childe gets even more value. So, the reason Childe is so good is essentially because he is another copy of Xingqiu with slightly different use cases. He doesn't have quite as many use cases, but for better or for worse, he is another copy of Xingqiu, one of the best supporting units in the game, who enables a lot of team comps, and it's just an important part of a lot of team comps. So getting another copy of Xingqiu is very, very good. But this isn't the only reason. The other reason is because Childe is a very good enabler for this unit that you get for free and get a weapon that is almost equivalent to a 5-star at Max Refine, which you can get for free just by fishing. And at Max Refine, it's I think it's 32% burst damage, 12% crit. I don't have it on completed on this account because I was lazy starting it. But you get Jangling for free for doing a little bit of the Abyss, and you get essentially given a 5-star weapon for her. So in my opinion, it is a huge waste to not have a team that could take advantage of this unit. And you can run her in, a standard national team. But the problem with the standard national team, and then say, let's roll for Hu Tao, is that you need Xingqiu, and Hu Tao needs Xingqiu as well. So you, essentially, if you wanted to use both Childe and Hu Tao and Jangling, you would need Childe already. Unless you wanted to run Jangling on a worse comp, maybe like a double Cryo with Rosario and Kaya. But if you wanted to use her in an actual, like in one of her stronger or strongest comps, you would need Childe and Xingqiu already. Another reason, there are plenty of units that, despite doing less damage than Hu Tao, can fill the same role as a main DPS Pyro. Like, you will possibly eventually roll a Diluc, who you could totally use. You can use Yanfei in this spot. There are other units that can fit into the slot of Hu Tao, and Hu Tao is also very mechanically intensive, unless you are absolutely out-gearing your content like a complete ton, to a degree whereas Childe, you need to learn how to rotate properly. Hu Tao, you physically need to play well to get a lot of damage out of her with her charge attack, jump cancels, and stuff like that. Especially if you're not going to go for her C1, which essentially removes her stamina issue. But even if you go for this, you still need to do cancels to really get damage that makes her a top tier unit. So for that reason, not only is Jangling free, you get a free 5-star weapon for her essentially, she's also easier to play, and Childe enables her very well. They are a ridiculously strong pairing, and also the other advantage to that team is that the rest of the units are also 4 stars, Bennett, Sucrose, with a switch to Kazuha being optional if you have him. Now, this might not matter to you if you are a very old account or if you have a ton of teams that do not require Xingqiu. So, if you are an individual who has an Ayaka or a Ganyu freeze team, It also has access to Mona. You don't necessarily need Jingchu, so you could afford to not run Zhangling and roll on Hu Tao. But most of the situations where you would have an account where you don't need Zhangling, or there's nobody I would not recommend to run a Zhangling team. Allow me to put it that way. There are very few, if any, reasons not to use this character since she's so powerful. She's free, weapons free, artifacts. She uses an artifact set that you're to be farming a ton of anyway. She wants an emblem set, which is an artifact set you're going to be getting for a lot of characters anyway, so you're going to end up with a lot of these sets. There's no reason not to build and use her, and Hu Tao essentially means you cannot use her because she needs Jingchu. Now, again, you can run her in a slightly worse comp, but if you do want Hu Tao, or if you need a reason to use Hu Tao, I would recommend, if you have a solid other team that does not require Jingchu, Zhao, Ganyu, Ayaka, Raiden carry, but that's a C2 team. You kind of need C2 to make that team work. You can make it work at C0, but at C0 you're much better off running Raiden National. Actually, I think at all constellations you're better off running Raiden National. Raiden National is just way better. But that team needs Jingchu and Zhangling, so whatever. Not really doesn't really enable you to run Hu Tao. And that team doesn't work with Childe, so yeah. Who else? Like, if you use Razor, I guess. Ito, if he's the main DPS. So I already said Zhao, Ganyu, Eula. So there are a couple units that if you have these units, you can get away without using Zhangling and still have two pretty solid teams. But I wouldn't recommend it, personally, for most players. This is just too powerful of a unit that is too easily enabled for you to waste her by having to put your Jingchu on another team. Now, so personally, my recommendation would be, between the two, right now, you should roll Childe, and then either try to get Hu Tao if you want her as well, or skip Hu Tao and wait for her next rerun. Or, logically, because we know Hu Tao's come out, we know, realistically, that means Zhao and Ganyu should both be coming out sometime soon here. So it may be better to save for one of these. I'm actually going to make a wholly dedicated video talking about these three and like their different use cases. So that's kind of just the main point. If you're just some quick and dirties on how to build Childe, weapons that are good: Rust, Battle Pass bow, Blackcliff, the craftable Inazuma bow. Any 5-star is fine except for Elegy. Assuming you want to use him in his meta reason and not just as like a burst bot. Artifact sets, Heart Adepts, or if you have good subs, Heart Adepts plus a Gladiator set, 2-piece Glad, 2-piece Heart, or 2-piece Glad, 2-piece Shimenawa, 2-piece Heart Adepts with good substats. For Hu Tao, your options are 2-piece Crimson plus 2-piece Tenacity, Glad, Shimenawa, weapons, Dragon's Bane, Deathmatch, Blackcliff, 5 stars obviously. But another good reason to go for Childe instead of Hu Tao is that he is lower investment, meaning that realistically, like, Hu Tao gets a lot of her power from C1 and from Staff of Homa. You by no means don't need them. I don't have either on my main yet. I plan on getting both. But you don't need them. They're not hugely important, but they are more of a significant damage increase than Childe, who works at C0 with 4-star weapons and only gets a little bit better. Hu Tao can get quite a bit better. That doesn't mean she outpaces him, though. Another thing, obviously, is just that Childe is more of a future safe unit, and that he is an enabler, not necessarily a carry himself, meaning that, you know, any characters we get that have massive amounts of pyro, electro, or even possibly cryo application, Childe can abuse that to have strong cores. This by no means not telling you to roll for Hu Tao, She's an amazingly fun unit. She's one of my favorite units in the entire game. But if you're looking at this purely from a logical reason, you essentially have to find a reason to roll for Hu Tao. You have to have already met other requirements. Whereas Childe, you essentially have to find a reason not to roll him. Like, even if you don't plan on running Hu Tao, even if you have other teams, even if you have a Eula team, even if you have a Zhao team, the fact of the matter is that Childe is actually an upgrade in the Xiangling national team. So if you use Xiangling, which you really should, I highly recommend her, especially now that we get essentially a free 5-star weapon for her. You should really consider rolling on Childe and not Hu Tao. Thanks for listening.